A's hire A's, B's hire C's and D's. So if you want to be the smartest person in the room, you're not thinking clearly. What you want to do is hire people smarter than you, more capable than you, and find the best and the brightest in the world.
Everyone says they're building AI right now. What separates real AI companies from AI theater?
There will be a mass extinction event in terms of startups. The people that have focused on just building an app or a bot, those type of implementations are easy to replicate. And when that happens, if they don't have a really strong, differentiated platform or set of capabilities, they will go away.
Mike, when we first spoke, you said something that really stuck with me, that community is the fastest truth engine. What did you learn about that during your time building the patterns and practices community at Microsoft?
It's true, Ferris. Let me kind of go back in time when we started to embrace community around building software, real time. And we would first start talking about requirements when we had an idea of what technology customers were struggling with and what their pain points were. And then we would organize our team around building a solution for it. And we would literally start inviting developers, architects in a community that we would stand up and we would put information out to them. We think this, we had a thesis, we put it out. They come back and say, don't do that. We want you to do this. So it was a dialogue, constant dialogue, not just of communication, but we dropped code to them on a weekly basis, open source. So when they dove deep into the code, they'd say, this is not the way we want this implementation. And so it was this constant iterative process by working closely with customers. We actually came up with a term for it back then, which was customer connected development. And it meant that we could do that at scale. And the better scale you have in getting requirements, the better product market fit that you have. And I can tell you in a number of our projects, we had 17,000 developers working with us on a routine basis, giving us feedback. So by the time we launched, we had a high degree of confidence that it would actually land and help our customers be successful using Microsoft technology.
That's incredible. I want to spend some time on this because in the venture world and in the startup world, we talk about product market fit a lot, and we talk about how we can get there through listening to customers. Founders would get design partners, and they would use that as an opportunity to learn about the product they're building and what they need to iterate. And as you know, many companies end up pivoting anyway. But you built a system around this. It must have had huge amounts of benefits, but what made it possible? Because that sounds like something that probably every single founder in the world should have.
We were one of the first teams at Microsoft that adopted agile development. So you have to be agile, in my opinion, because you want to show incremental progress as you go. Now, when you're a startup, we don't want to share all of our source code, and we will not. But that being said, we could share SDKs, and we still have the mental model around doing that at Iridius. In fact, we are in the process of doing something we call co-development. And that co-development is yet another method to engage directly with customers as we're building the product so that we're getting real customer requirements and we're getting real feedback from the customer all throughout development. Now, we can't do that at scale. We could do like 3 or 4 of those customers, and we're still in the process of recruiting a couple more. That method is one method of customer connected development. Then we need to go at scale and get more. And the way we're going to do that is we have just entered into a partnership with a global system integrator that has about 700,000 employees around the world. And they're one of our investors. They are very excited about our technology and our platform, and they believe they can apply it to their business for their customers. And they have subject matter experts at scale. So we're going to bring them into a community to get the feedback we need to do exactly what you said earlier, which is nail product market fit, which is, one of our core objectives for the team right now.
It sounds like, from a community standpoint, you're an expert at it. You've done it before and you're doing it again. Why is it not possible for other founders to think the same way? I mean, building that type of community can only leverage huge amounts of benefits for a company.
It's a good question. I have to tell you that once we discovered how we could do this at scale, I never stopped doing it. And the customers will always tell you the truth. Now, sometimes what they're asking for, you can't do. If it's not a pattern, a pervasive pattern that you're seeing across customers, probably shouldn't productize that capability. But if it is, you definitely want to do it. And to be frank, our SVP of engineering that literally used to work for me at Microsoft, he won't do things without checking with customers and making sure that we know which customers want what features, and we have traceability to them so that our hygiene is very good about our decision making.
Well, you worked at Microsoft and you worked under some amazing leaders. One particular Microsoft leader that I had on the show is Bob Muglia, who
Oh, yeah.
ran Snowflake. And one thing that we discussed during the podcast was the level of discipline that he applied at Snowflake when he thought about the customers and building the right product. And I asked him, I said, where did that come from? And his answer was Microsoft. Because even when you look at it right now, like Microsoft as a company has been one of the very few companies that has consistently projected huge growth and winning in the space of the biggest companies in the world from a market cap perspective. What makes Microsoft so special?
Interestingly, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it, I worked at AWS as well. I got recruited by them after I left Microsoft. And let me contrast the two companies, because I think it's interesting. The question about what is it that drives excellence in product at Microsoft, in my opinion, one of those things is to take a long-term approach. Be very careful about who your customer is. Don't go after the wrong set of customers too early. And this is a true statement. This is a Bob Muglia experience, where at Snowflake, one of the gentlemen on our board of directors, Clark Golasani, was at Merck trying to convince Bob to bring Snowflake to him. And Bob was disciplined enough to say no. And I can tell you, as a CEO of a startup, it's really hard to say no to something like that, because you're wanting to get into the market, you're wanting to win customers, you're wanting to show a broader value proposition. But being disciplined is a huge part of being successful in the long term. If we take a look at AWS, along with Amazon, they have leadership principles there, and they live them. They don't just have it written down. You'll be in a meeting, our meetings every day with people, and you'll be challenging each other. I'm not sure we're thinking big enough. That's one of their leadership principles. And if you say, well, we're only going after this market of customers, they'll say, I'm not sure you're being customer obsessed. And so they use them on a daily basis. They hire for them. And if you don't meet the bar when they are looking for assessing you against the leadership principles, they won't hire you. And it doesn't matter if you're the best technical engineer in the world. They won't hire you if you don't fit into their leadership principles. So both of those companies have different capabilities and, I would say, cultural dynamics that drive excellence, and also keep the bar high on who they recruit and bring into the company.
It's a combination of, from your time at Microsoft, is this discipline. And with AWS and Amazon, it's the customer obsession.
Totally.
Being maniacally focused on the customer.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And interestingly, one of the people we just brought back into the company here in Iridius was at Microsoft for around 23 years. And he's wanting to do competitive analysis and dig in deep on competition. I support it. But at AWS, they focus a lot less on competition, and they focus on customer success and outcomes. And it's interesting to just understand the difference in how they approach that particular area.
I want to touch on the discipline just before we move on to the second topic that I wanted to uncover, which is the company that you're building today. But just regarding discipline, what does that actually mean?
What it means to me is that, number one, we get absolute clarity on who our customer is. We know their pains. We know their hopes and desires. And we're obsessed about making sure our product fits for those set of customers. Once we nail that, then what we do is we start to plan out what we're going to build. And part of that discipline is getting absolute clarity in our backlog of what needs to be built in what sequence. And then it's a relentless pursuit of execution, which means that I look at execution as a heartbeat. And when the team starts to get into their sprints and we start executing and building code, which we're doing already, it's a machine, and we don't slow the machine down. We don't have unnecessary meetings with executives. We have byproducts of execution that we can share with executives and customers. And it's also about delivering results and having a customer impact. So those are the key things that we zero in. And there's a lot of tools we can use, like how are we going to not only scope what we're going to accomplish as a company, and how are we going to measure results incrementally as we go, so that we're sure we're on track and we're watching those numbers constantly. And if we're off track, we course correct. And so it's both knowing where you're going and making sure as you start to go there, you have the journey mapped out and you execute it.
The reason I wanted to ask this because I feel that it's such an important part of building a company, but at the same time, for a founder and for a startup, sometimes your impatience can get in the way of being disciplined. Mike, let's talk about where you are today. You're
Great.
starting your own company, which you started already, you raised and you're building. For the audience of the listeners, I'd love to hear what you're building right now.
Iridius is focused on AI and highly regulated industries. The challenge right now for those companies that are in highly regulated industries are they have a lot of their projects that are just stuck. They get them all the way even to an MVP, but they feel like it's too risky to move them into production because they're not getting deterministic results with AI. The second challenge is really around security and compliance. They're really not negotiable in highly regulated industry. And innovation now can move much quicker with AI, yet all the compliance requirements and controls are not in place. And finally, there's this missing foundation of compliant agentic enterprise architecture. And that's what we're focused on solving. In particular, there's really two major components of what we're building, which is one is a knowledge engine. That knowledge engine allows us to turn complex regulations and policies and standard operating procedures into executable logic for agents. The second is building out by the way, before we leave the knowledge engine, think of that as a corpus of knowledge. So we will take all the compliance requirements, standard operating procedures, ingest them, and structure them into a data structure that allows us to build agents that can interrogate that data real time fast and help you be compliant by design and compliant once you're in execution. And the way we actually enable customers to do that is we built out what we call the Intelligent Solution Factory, and that allows us to kind of inject this compliance requirements all the way through the development process. And it's their development process and their whatever tools they want for code generation using AI and building their agents. But this is a journey all the way through development so that they can land their solutions in the production environment safely. And at the end of the day, they get reduced cost, they can scale, and their time to value and getting their solutions in production is much, much faster.
When you're going into these meetings with these highly regulated, compliance-heavy organizations, what would you say, Mike, are the things that those companies worry about the most when it comes to compliance?
When it comes to compliance, the thing I have heard them tell us is that when they get audited and they get called out on an audit, it's all hands on deck. It takes months of analysis to go back and pull up all of the data they need to show exactly what happened and how they got where they are. So that evidence is one of the key things that is difficult for them to manage because it's not highly automated. And I'll just give you an example. Imagine if you had all of your audit ready materials in an immutable ledger, like a blockchain, right? Or a ledger that allowed you to be able to go back in time and see everything that happened through a validation process and be able to just have it ready for the auditors if they showed up. Save millions and millions of dollars every incident. And so I see that as a big hurdle. And the second one is that when you look at engineering capability today and audit capability, there's an impedance mismatch there. So now all the audit capabilities, and think of it around compliance, are viewed as slowing everything down. That's one of the big pain points we see.
So when you're going into these meetings with chief compliance officers or chief AI officers or whoever's on the other side of the table, what's the first question they typically, if there is a trend, what is the first question they typically ask?
They want to know how we're doing what we do. And I would say that's after we take them through a demo and show them what the product's capable of doing. Our vision for the product is a better way to state it at this phase. And they want to know how we're doing it. And they also want to dig into a lot of the details around how are you getting all these compliance requirements harmonized, right? Because if you think about a large company, especially highly regulated, you've got country level, you've got industry level, maybe state and local government, depending on where you're focused. And then you've got your own standard operating procedures that you have to normalize and harmonize with all of those other requirements. And I'll give you an example. One of our potential customers has over 70,000 SOPs. And so, we've been stopped before when we just talk about the knowledge engine and they said, stop, we'll just buy that right there. That we don't want to talk anymore. That's what we want. So there is a lot of pain out there right now, and we're hoping to be the pain reliever.
And I completely get it. I think this whole AI rush now, the more complex, larger, heavily regulated organizations, they don't want to miss the curve or have an opportunity to acquire these technologies to accelerate their growth, but at the same time having to worry about the importance of compliance and regulations. But I'm just wondering, how different is it selling AI today to selling traditional enterprise software?
That's a good question. Let me go back in time a little bit. When we founded the company, and it was founded on safe and responsible AI over 18 months ago. When we talked to our colleagues, very senior leaders at some of the hyperscalers, they'd say, Mike, nobody cares about compliance. And, it was more of, hey, look what we can do with AI. But as time has gone on, and they've recognized that our customers won't put this in production, their solutions on our platform, unless they're compliant. Now they're bringing us to their customers. So I see the enterprise sale challenge right now with AI is that there's a lot of investment going on, but that investment isn't translating into ROI yet. That is a question mark for them. How do we make sure that we can do this in a safe way, use AI in a safe way? How can we focus on the right set of problems and pain points for the business? And how do we turn this experimentation into economic value for the business? And so we see a lot of investment going in right now on the incubations and learning. And I see a lot of hunger in getting their applications and incubations in the production environment. So traditionally, I think it was a lot easier as in business to sell or to adopt technology because a lot of the historical development has been deterministic. When you write code, you can make sure it does the same thing over and over and over. And without being deterministic in an enterprise environment, which AI is not deterministic unless you have methods to try to drive it in that direction, there's a lot of concern that they'll get it wrong. AI will do something that it's not supposed to, and we don't have the necessary benchmarks to determine really what is the quality factor of release A versus release B. Are we getting better, closer towards being deterministic, or do we just have a regression? So I think a lot of those skills and capabilities aren't in the market yet. And there is concern around having some catastrophic event because they've implemented AI.
When you're looking at these larger companies that have high regulation that they have to comply with, are they looking for innovation when it comes to AI, or are they looking to just reduce risk?
I don't think they're looking for just innovation. They're looking to have an impact on the business. They want to do it in a safe, responsible way to minimize their risk. And so that combination of expectations and requirements is one reason they're having conversations with us.
So you're talking to some very big companies right now, and as potential
We are.
customers or already customers. When you think about trust, how do they find trust in a company building within AI?
You build it slowly, but this is something I learned at Microsoft, how I kind of lived that way my entire career, is make a commitment and pay it off. Many of my teams at Microsoft, they used to hear me say, and they would repeat it, do what you say you're going to do. And that's how you earn trust, by delivering results and doing what you say you're going to do and being consistent about it and tell them the truth. If you can't do it, don't overcommit.
I want to move on to a different topic about founder mindset and team pace. And I'm going to read this off my pad because when we were doing the preparation call, you and I, you said something that really stuck with me. And it's something that I'm finding as I'm growing my businesses. You said founders set the pace and the team rises to it or self-selects out. How do you maintain that intensity without burning people out?
Well, I think sometimes I look at the founders as a pace car, and you've got to go out and put the energy in. When everybody sees that you're taking ownership of whatever needs to get done, you're not trying to stay in your lane. You're doing whatever the business needs. Let me give you an example. We had a challenge early on around our ICP, our messaging and positioning. The website was out of date. The head of our finance and ops, myself, the COO and CFO, we just jumped in and did it. And we spent the weekend doing it. And I was going to present in London at the AI ISG Summit, and we were one of the competitors for their startup challenge. And I knew everybody in that room. There were over 200 people in the room, enterprise customers. They would be going to our website. So it had to get done. So we got it done. But that's what I mean when you're setting the pace. It's not me trying to direct people to say, we need to get this done by this date. It means I'm going to help. I'm going to write part of the messaging and position, and we're going to work together. So that's the key, I think. And, some people that don't want to participate in that, that's not their DNA for how they think. In a startup, things move so fast that what'll happen is they'll feel like they're not contributing. And if they don't feel like they're adding value, we've had several people that have selected to drop out.
What separates people that thrive in startup environments and the ones that struggle deeply?
It's a great question. And I believe that in my experience, as in a startup, you have to be willing to roll up your sleeves and do work. You're not managing people that are doing work. When you're at a big company like Microsoft I had over 250 engineers in one of my teams, you're managing through other people. You're hiring great people that can manage those resources and execute. In a startup, we have 11 people. Everybody works. This manager hierarchy doesn't exist. We have managers, we have leaders of like engineering and our finance team and our go-to-market, but they're all hands-on. So I'd say that's the big difference.
I love it. I'm going through that right now as we are scaling our company. And I always remember this. I saw a clip on YouTube once of Steve Jobs. And this was perhaps maybe in the 90s, or maybe when he was coming back to Apple after Next. I don't remember the exact time this was recorded, but he said in a company, you select a group of people, and it could be maybe 10 people. And if they're the right people, A players for the company aligned with the vision and goals, they begin to police the environment, and you can scale from there. So I've tried to live by that philosophy. How much do you believe in that?
100%. Let me give you an experience I had in my career, which was I went to our executive leadership team at Microsoft and pitched an idea. And I worked for the former vice president of Windows marketing for the world. Super smart guy. It was Mike. I got funded by the senior leadership team to go do the patterns of praxis team. And the first thing that Mike said to me, he sat me down, he said, Kropp, A's hire A's, B's hire C's and D's. So if you want to be the smartest person in the room, you're not thinking clearly. What you want to do is hire people smarter than you, more capable than you, and find the best and the brightest in the world. When you bring the right people in, you get the right results.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a firm believer of that. I think it's sometimes you'll find this going through some cycles before you find them. But once you do, there's some momentum. Right. So I want to now go to our quick fireside questions. So quick questions I'd like to fire at you, tackling different topics that I believe quite important that I'd love to get your thoughts on. The first question I wanted to ask, which is about AI hype and reality, is everyone says they're building AI right now. What separates real AI companies from AI theater?
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that I've been doing, as you know, Ferris, is fundraising. And when we're in having conversations with venture capitalists, they quickly know how to get right down to the core of what's going on, as you know. And in several conversations, we've had discussions about AI hype. Is it a bubble? And kind of the consensus, I would say right now, is that there will be a mass extinction event in terms of startups, I believe. And I believe that when the people that have focused on just building an app or a bot, those type of implementations are easy to replicate. And over time, AI is getting better and better and better at coding. There will be a day when we can replicate capabilities. And when that happens, those companies, if they don't have a really strong, I would say, differentiated platform or set of capabilities, they will go away. And so I think, along with several people I've talked to that are serial entrepreneurs and VCs, they've voiced those concerns as well.
Next question is about Steve Ballmer. What's the most important leadership lesson you learned from Steve Ballmer?
I learned so many. I could give you a few. I'll tell you, the first time I was going to meet with Steve, I was told by a vice president. He sat me down in a conference room. He drew a circle on the board and he put an X in the middle. He goes, if the first thing you do is you listen to Steve, and when he asks you the question, that's the X. Answer his question. If he asks you for more data, give him he put an X on top of this, or goes, give him one data point, answer the question. And so that was not something that was part of my communication style when I started, but I learned it awful fast. And so that was one. And the second was, you have to be prepared, more prepared than I'd ever been in my career. And what that looks like is, we got flown down to Silicon Valley, and my team was evaluating which companies were the best CRM players. And we came back with an opinion of who we thought was the best. And we literally got into my office and drew a logic tree before our meeting with Steve, that we said, if he trusts us, we're going to go down this path. If he doesn't trust our answers, then we're going down this other path. And we mapped out what his objections would be and what our responses are going to be. You're anticipating so many different scenarios and preparing for conversations with executives like Steve, who's brilliant and very intense and wants answers.
You've recruited some exceptional people throughout your career. Why do great people actually join Founders?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One, that the vision of what you're trying to do, they can see why it's going to be so impactful, and they want to be part of it. Two, they know you and they know that you've had impact in many different roles that you've done in your career. There's a certain amount of trust there. In addition to that, they know that this is a situation when you start a company, you think you know what the target is when you start, and this is a series of adaptations and adapting to where the target really is. And I'm sure you know that too, given what you're doing. And so I think that the confidence that they have in you, that you'll get that right, and you don't think you know it all, and you want to be a learn it all, that matters, and that helps them gain confidence that they can be part of a team that can go change the world.
One last question on founder conviction. What separates founders who change industries from founders who just build companies?
I think honestly, it's about what you're trying to accomplish. I'll give you an example. I built a team where one of the members of the team was focused on security, all up for Microsoft. And he came to me and said, I got my team, I'm ready to go. And I said, okay, is it the A team? Are you going to be able to change the world? And I asked him the question, and he looked at me and he walked away. And he came back 3 weeks later and said, I have the A team and we can change the world, and I know, and then we're going for it. And so from my point of view, having that vision of what you're really trying to accomplish and making it, thinking big around what's possible. And I believe it's infectious. It raises the bar on really how to think about the impact that we could really have with customers and helping them.
Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I want to wrap up with one last question. Tradition on this podcast, which is always to ask every guest for a book recommendation. I've said it many times on this show, I'm a massive book reader. I love reading books, and I think we can take a lot from books, but naturally take a lot more from experiences. But for you, what has been a book that has truly resonated?
Well, I have to lean in on AI, right? On this, there's a lot of them that have, but the one that I would suggest people consider reading is a physicist named Michio Kaku. Has a book out. It's been out for a bit. It's called Quantum Supremacy. And it talks about how the fruition of quantum computing, how it's going to impact the planet and our lives and our ability to grow more food than we ever have before. There's so many opportunities that are positive. Now, intersect quantum computing, this is the bridge that he finishes up on, with AI. And think about what's going to be possible with both. And I just found thinking about that problem it's exciting, it's scary, and it kind of shows us a glimpse of how this planet could change in a good way if we steer it in that direction.
Love it. That was a great recommendation, and I like that it's an AI one. It's been a while since we've had one about AI over the last few episodes. It's mainly been about business, sales, growth. So really appreciate that. Mike, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for making the time to be on the show, and good luck with the company, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot of success.
Thank you, Ferris, and good luck with the podcast. We strongly recommend that everybody listens to your shows. They're great. I just listened to one with Clark Listani the other day, and I was loving it. So thank you for doing this.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Inside the Silicon Mind. This podcast is powered by Harrison Clark. For more episodes, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. As always, stay curious, stay consistent, and stay
inside the Silicon Mind.